Chapter 7, Journeying to the Mountains, Snow's Farewell, Vingerhut Manor on the island of Rosral, 333 solar year. On the far side of Rosral, outside the town was a small estate overlooking the northern coast of the island. Inside this moderately affluent home, a man laid on his deathbed. He was not particularly old, in fact only in his mid-40s, but the years had taken their toll on him. He had lived a difficult and troubled life. He had hoped that by moving out of the hustle and bustle of the city he might find some of that elusive serenity his heart had yearned for so much. In truth, with his wife and 2 children he had indeed found some measure peace in recent years, but he still carried a lot of regret for past sins on his conscience. He wanted to atone for his sins in his own small way. So from time to time when small monsters or pirates would try attacking some helpless bystander on the outskirts of town, he would step in and with his modest combat skills could defeat the weak beast or drunken ruffians with moderate ease. Despite pleas from his family not to put himself at risk, he continued to put himself in danger to protect others whenever the chance arose. As his wife correctly assumed, he did this to make up for his past mistakes, but, also, as she quietly suspected, because he wanted to imitate him and be a hero. Honestly, she wanted to imitate that man as well. For that man had always had that unique ability to bring out the inner strength and courage in people. But that was in the past. We're married now and we have children to think of. How could he have done this, she thought to herself. These thoughts from the dark-complexioned woman now attending her dying husband quickly passed as his coughing began to intensify once again. She looked down on him taking a cool cloth to his feverish forehead and began to stroke his now white hair. His blonde hair had been turning white for years. The dying man joked with her that it worked perfectly for his name's sake. "Is he here yet, Jewel?" asked the sick man. Turning her head to the window she said, "I sent Vincent down to the harbor this morning and according to the nasal bird message from our ship, the Vingerhut, he should be arriving in dock any time." "Good. Cough, cough. There are many things I want to say. All the paperwork is in order, is it not?" he asked again for about the 10th time that day. Still with the same smile, Jewel nodded her head as she had the 9 times before that, trying desperately to keep a brave face, and not wanting to get frustrated. No, she reminded herself. His final hours on this earth and her memories of it would only be happy ones. The family had already said their goodbyes to each other 3 days ago when after the doctor said there was nothing he could do for the man, be it with medicine or runic magic. The venom was toxic and it had already spread to his nervous system and had poisoned all his blood. It would only be a matter of hours before he departed forever. Hugging and kissing his wife and children, he made his peace with this world and told them how much he loved them with tears streaming down all their faces. These last few days were a miracle. Snow should not still be alive, said the baffled doctor yesterday. He is not getting better or anything. Because his body is indeed shutting down. Perhaps the water rune he had embedded in his body all these years is the reason. I don't know. Regardless, he won't be with us much longer, said the doctor with a puzzled, but compassionate tone. Jewel knew that these last few days were indeed a blessing and a bonus, but it had nothing to do with a rune. No, it was Snow's determination, or perhaps his stubbornness, she joked with herself, if only to ease her grief a moment. However, she knew it was because he wanted to see him, his friend, one last time before he sailed off into the unknown of the stars. Suddenly, a young girl no more than 5 or 6 years old entered the room. She had her mother's dark complexion, but was a bit fairer in hue due to her father. However, the little girl had the same light blonde hair as they both did in their youths. Only her hair was long and curly, as her mother's had been when she was a child, before she cut it to join the Gaian Knights. The young child ran into the room, with a very concerned look on her face. It was not because of what was happening to her father, for she was still too young to understand the reality of death. No, Her concern was that she had lost her favorite stuffed mermaid doll. She ran up to her father's side. "Daddy, I can't find me mermaid. And you promised me we have our tea party tomorrow. Mama says, you are gonna go on a trip. So, I wanna have all me favorite dollies join us before you go bye-byes. And I don't know where she went. I lost me mermaid. I think I left her on the beach where that scary monster tried to eat me. And you saved me, Daddy. I love you, Daddy. You're me hero. You have to get better before your trip and the party with you and me and Nya." After the young girl said these things, Jewel had to leave the room, and Snow, holding back tears, used what strength he had left in his arms to embrace his daughter one last time. He said to her, "Don't worry, my precious Opal. I am sure that Nya is just sleeping and that when your brother gets home, he can go down to the beach and get her back for you. Plus, tomorrow, cough, cough, tomorrow, at our tea party, we'll all have fun. You have my favorite kind of tea, wild apple, right?" The young girl nodded her head yes. "Good, good, I can't wait. Right now, cough, why don't you go play in your room and I'll see you soon." Snow finished speaking, barely able to hold back the emotion as the child departed. As she left the room, Jewel and another young man quickly entered. Vincent, who was 15 years old, was the spitting image of his father in his youth, save for the shorter hair and his mother's eye color. Both had smiles on their faces, a rare thing these last few days. Not missing a beat, Snow inquired excitedly, "Is he here?" A great smile came upon the dying man's face as he would now see his old friend one last time before he departed. "Quickly go greet him for us," he urged. Jewel spoke up, "The Vinger hut is actually pulling around ashore. They're using our private dock, so as to waste no time getting him here for you, dear." They left the house to go and greet Snow's special guest. The young man jumped off the ship before it had fully come to a complete stop and the plank could be lowered. Embracing his old friend Jewel, he asked, "How is he? Can I see him?" Jewel couldn't find the words at the moment, but they were not needed as the man knew just by looking at her what the situation was like. As the small group raced back up the hill to the mansion, and entered the room of their dying loved one, they all looked and saw it. It was too late. Snow Vingerhut was dead. Tears began to fall from their eyes anew. Seeing her mother and brother crying, but not knowing really why, just knowing they were sad, Opal started crying too. As the bearer of the rune of punishment approached the white-haired man, he fell at his bedside in mourning and apologized for not arriving sooner to say goodbye to his old friend, his comrade, his brother. As he got closer and looked, he noticed the now dead man's appearance. Snow's face had an expression on it that neither Laszlo nor Jewel had seen in years. For it was a look of content and peace. The very things that eluded the man for so many years in his life, he now seemingly had found moments before he had passed into the beyond. Indeed, Laszlo recalled later he had not seen that kind of a smile on the man since they were both teenagers on the night before their graduation from the Gay and Night Academy. During the kindling ritual, when they both had been so enchanted by all the fireworks, celebration, and excitement just for them. Jewel handed Laszlo a letter. The paper was bit wet along its peripheries from all the crying she had been doing, but he received it a bit hesitantly from her now trembling hand. She then pointed to two items on the table across the room. One was a brown package with a brown tie wrapped around it. The other was a small blue pot, with its blue fragmented piece design, which Laszlo recognized immediately as a Celadon urn. He turned back to Jewel for an explanation with the look of "I don't understand." Seeing that his mother was, otherwise, distracted at this point, Vincent spoke up, "Well sir, father was not sure if you would arrive here in time. So, earlier this week he had me write 2 letters as he dictated them to me. In the one he requested that you and I have his remains cremated." At hearing these words about his body, Jewel started crying all the more intensely and little Opal responded in kind, though still not sure why. Vincent then made eye contact with Laszlo and gesturing with his eyes that they head to a door that led back outside to the portico. Once the two men were outside, Vincent resumed his explanation. Father wanted to be cremated, his ashes placed in that Celadon urn, and then he wanted us to scatter them on the shores next to some old ruins off the southern peninsula of the old Kuliuk Empire. He said you two fought together there. Kuliuk? You mean Fort Elil? Laszlo interrupted him with a sort of whispery tone. Resuming once more, the young man continued, Yes, Elil. So, then I assume you would know the area and could guide our ship there to perform the ceremony? Laszlo nodded his head yes, but then asked him why Snow would want to be placed there. His son explained that growing up he had heard the stories of Laszlo and Snow's adventures back during the island's unification war over and over again. Even, in spite of his betrayal and mistakes, Laszlo still took Snow back and forgave him. And that together they were victorious. Moreover, when you, Laszlo, had given my dad and a few others the responsibility of defeating the enemy mastermind behind the whole war, Graham Cray. My dad said he felt like it was his chance to really redeem himself and be useful again. In fact, I think that's why he wanted to be buried there. Because that was the one place and the one time when he felt like he made the biggest difference, not just for himself, but for our whole country. Laszlo nodded as now he understood. What about the other letter? Laszlo then inquired as Vincent started walking back inside the house to be with his family. The young man stopped a moment and looking over his shoulder simply said, I think that is one you just need to read for yourself. Over the next few days, Laszlo, Snow's family, and a few others made the preparation for his body. Having placed his ashes into the Celadon urn, they all gathered aboard the Vingerhut and started sailing in a north by northeast direction according to Laszlo's instructions. While on the ship, Laszlo, finally, opened the brown package, which was the old white-laced pirate's uniform Snow had worn during the war. Now a bit aged, but still well preserved. Laszlo recalled mentioning to Snow that he had thought this uniform was the best-looking garb he owned, at least compared to the rags they had found him in or that gaudy green nobles said he liked to wear on special occasions. In fact, it had been this very uniform Snow had worn when he led that small group along with Lady Eleanor to confront Cray. Next, he opened the envelope and found two letters inside. The first letter was just the instructions about taking his body to Fort Elil and casting his remains along the shore of the now desolate ruins as his son had stated. However, what Vincent had forgotten to mention is that Snow had requested that Laszlo wear Snow's white and black-laced pirate's garb set when performing the rituals, which finally made sense to Laszlo as to why he had been given such an unusual gift from his old friend. He then turned his attention to the next letter. This letter was indeed more personal, and as he started reading it he could see why Vincent had insisted the old warrior read the letter for himself. The bearer of the rune of punishment began to feel his heart move deeply in him, and many memories and emotions began swelling up inside. Not since he realized that the blonde noblewoman in his true rune's memories was actually his long-lost mother had Laszlo been so deeply moved in his spirit. The letter read, My dearest friend. If you are reading these words, then it is too late for me and I did not get the chance I had wanted to share them with you in person. So please hear them now. Ever since our youth you have complicated my life. I recall being lonely as a small lad, and then one day my father said the ocean gods had seen my loneliness and brought me a playmate. As we started to play together, I liked having someone to boss around a bit. But in truth, though my loneliness was gone, I suddenly found myself jealous that I had to start sharing all of my toys with you. That's what started it all for me, I think, Laszlo. This weird double feeling. I always liked you, but was always so damn envious toward you. As we both started training to enter the academy, even at our young age, Our tutors could tell there was something special about your skills. I, childishly, thought if I had a real sword, a grown-up sword, and you still had your silly wooden ones, then our teachers would see how good I was, and would compliment me, the way they loved to praise you. So, I begged father to buy me a blade of my own, and on my 12th birthday sure enough he got me one. I remember thinking how powerful I would be now, and how maybe thinking you would be the jealous one for a change. Remember when we snuck out of the mansion and headed for the back alleys to kill a few furballs? That's when we had an encounter with that fish monster and we first met Kirel and his father, Walter. But even with my new sword, it wasn't my skills that this stranger noticed, it was yours. Even with your stupid wooden toys, it was you that this foreign man complimented. In the weeks that followed, I just could not understand. How could I, the son and heir of the mighty Vingerhut family, be so inferior to just a commoner, a nobody? Since we were both about to start being enrolled at the academy, I begged father to move you off the grounds and to live on the barracks with the rest of the cadets. I thought then you'd be jealous of me and realized how important I was living at such a great house, while you had to move in with the others. You didn't see me, but I watched from my window as you and the servants packed your stuff and moved you to the academy. I thought, good, now he'll be alone, and finally see how much better I am, because I'll still have everything and he'll have nothing. Once again though, I let my pride blind me. When I arrived for orientation, I saw that you were not alone, but you had in fact already made friends with 4 other trainees, Jewel, Paula, Dal, and Kenneth. I was seething with jealousy once more. How could you have replaced me and had not only 1, but 4 new friends already? I figured, I would just have to beat you at your own game, and I'll make those guys like me even more than they liked you. So, I walked over and started talking with you guys. I don't even remember what I said or what we talked about. But I remember how you made me feel as low. I wasn't sure if you knew that it was because of me you got kicked out of the household, but I could see you didn't care. You seemed to be happy in your new circumstances. It didn't matter where you went, people always seemed to gather around you and like you. Hell, even though I was still so angry at you, I couldn't help but be in awe of you and wanted to hang out with you guys. Those next few years were like a blur to me, the training with runes, fencing, sailing, and all those lessons that Masters Conrad, Katarina, and Commander Glenn poured into us and pushed us to go beyond our normal imitations. The 5 of us always encouraged one another. I had made myself leader of our little group. Yet, whenever we had to fight or do a mock naval battle engagement, everyone looked to you to lead us. In spite of me being given the lead by our teachers, simply because of who my father was. Nevermore was this truth more apparent to me than on that day when we encounter that pirate, Brando, who would change your life forever with the rune of punishment. I have often wondered for many years, what if you had been the one who fled, and I had stayed, would the rune have consumed my life, or would I have been its next host, instead of Glenn and ultimately you? Regardless, we can't change the past. So, when Glenn died, and you finally got the true rune, I finally saw a chance to get what I always wanted. For once people weren't flocking to you in praise, but rather some started to blame you for his death. At last, I would be the one people looked to and followed. All I had to do was get rid of you and the commandership, the power, friendships, and respect would all be mine and not yours. Many in the leadership wanted you dead. However, I still thought of you as a friend and I wanted you gone, but I couldn't kill you. So I ordered exile and had Katarina carry out the orders. At the time she was one of the loudest voices that wanted you executed for murdering the commander. But I couldn't free you, not without exposing my own lies. You exiled and gone and me being in command, I thought my life would get better, but as normal I was wrong. When I learned Kray was looking for the rune and that my father had made that deal with Kuliuk, well, you know the rest. Those few times we fought each other and you just let me go each time. I couldn't understand you or why you kept doing it. I thought it was some cruel trick you were playing on me, or you were trying to get revenge on me by casting me aside again and again, just as I had done to you as kids. However, just like before, despite being cast from your home, you found a new one and made new friends. Only this time you had dozens and dozens of new comrades. Commoners, pirates, nobles, soldiers, foreigners, even the Obel royal family followed you. You have such a great power to gather people to yourself. That day you found me adrift at sea, I was content to die in my own failures. As I realized I was so powerless, I had always been powerless, as I told you that day. I finally let my pride die and join you against the Cool Yuk. In spite of me putting you through hell, you still took me back, and more than that, you still counted me as a friend, when all I deserved was death. I finally understood why it was that the rune that governs atonement and forgiveness would have chosen you. No one I know would have done what you did. There is, indeed, a great power within you, and it doesn't come from that true rune or your natural leadership ability, but simply it comes from you. It is just you. It's not your words, nor warrior skills, nor magical powers, it is only you. You are a hero in the truest sense of the word. I have always strived to do my best, because that is what you do. You bring out the best in people without even asking them to do it. You are the better man. You are the best. It is your ship, my captain, and I, Snow Vingerhut, am your crew, and I shall follow you to whatever end. Forevermore your friend. Snow. After he was done reading the letter, he read it 3 more times, so he would not forget a line of it. He committed the whole thing to memory. Laszlo held it to a candle, letting the corner catch on fire. Soon the whole letter was nothing but embers and ash. Laszlo held out his hand, catching the ashes as they fell. Having gathered all the pieces as the small fire quickly died out, he dropped them in the urn with his friend's remains. He promised himself and his friend that he shall never forget his words. As the ship dropped anchor, the crew took the family ashore. They were surprisingly greeted by many others. There before them were Tal, Kenneth, Paula, Katerina, and even Flair. Apparently, Jewel has sent a message via Nasal Bird, informing her old friends of what had happened and how she and Laszlo were coming to this place to honor Snow. The old friends greeted and consoled each other over the loss of one of their own. Laszlo couldn't help but stand back and look at his old friends. They all looked so grown up. Most of them now in their 40s, and even Katerina in her 50s. While he, being born in the same decade as his friends, still barely looked more than 20 because of the rune of punishment. He wondered how many more years it would be until he would have attended the last of these people's funerals. Would he one day attend little Opal's funeral when she was an old woman and had passed on? Even more, would he attend Snow and Jewel's unborn grandchildren's funerals as well? It was too much for him to think about, given all he had been through that week. Luckily, he had already put on Snow's pirate garb per the request. He carried the Celadon urn to the shore as the sun was now setting in the western sky. The small party of friends and family watched as the twin sword master took the urn and began tossing the man's ashes onto the sandy shore as the waves and tides began mixing them together and pulling them out to sea. Afterwards, when the crying and embracing had subsided, Kenneth and Tal began retelling stories of the old days and all their adventures to the children. Vincent had heard these same stories a million times before from his dad. But hearing them again from these two seemed to make the stories feel like new. As though he were hearing them for the first time again. That night, while everyone was sleeping on the beach, Laszlo awoke. He packed, left a small note explaining what he was going to do, and left them. It was all just too much for him, too much had happened so quickly. He just had to get away for a while. He looked northward beyond the scattered ruins of the once mighty fortress of Elil toward the mountains. He knew from his previous adventures that many plains, cities, and whole countries he had never even seen before laid before him on this vast northern continent on the other side of those mountains. It would be a great place to lose himself for a while. And perhaps while getting himself lost for a time, he might find himself again. Plus, maybe even get some answers to some of the questions he was now wrestling within his heart. He looked out to the northern mountains beyond El-Il and taking a deep breath he set out for a new journey. Taking a deep breath, Laszlo gazed out at the northern mountains of Falena now as they came into view over the horizon as the small river boat made its way toward the nation's capital city of Sulfalena. Laszlo couldn't help but experience feelings of nostalgia as once again he was heading off into an unknown situation into a foreign land with many mountains before him. It had been 4 years since he left his friends that night on the beach at El-Il in hopes that he would find for himself some answers. Now here he was once again with more unknowns than ever as their small ship entered the harbor. As they made their way to the front of the deck, they saw a beautiful golden light shimmering in the distance over a huge city built in the middle of the river, with its gleaming white marble walls and buildings. It was breathtaking. It was easily the most amazing city the island ambassadors had ever seen. Or at least, that was the impression Linda had gotten from their facial expressions. Having lived all her life in the palace, she had always just taken for granted how blessed her city was for its great beauty and majesty. But now she felt a deeper sense of pride in her city listening to young Daniel go on and on about how amazing the palace looked. As the ship pulled up to the dock and they got off, a huge parade of troops arrived in special formation to welcome them all to the city. Alinda and her knights were the first to get off the small ship. She then turned to the 3 diplomats, and making eye contact with Laszlo said, "As the Princess of Falena, let me once more welcome you and your friends to our country. Welcome to Sulfalena,